Silver Tempest is the 12th and final mainline set in the Sword and Shield era of the Pokemon trading card game. It's kind of funny, at the time the community thought that this set wasn't going to have that big of an impact on the meta, with some even saying Reggie Drago VSTAR was the marquee deck of the set, and holy cow, were we ever wrong. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about the best and most noteworthy cards from Silver Tempest. We have to start our journey by talking about Lugia VSTAR. And initially, people were like, oh, this card looks Tempest Dive, 220 damage, discard a stadium and play for 4 colorless energy. We thought, like, that's too much energy, not enough damage. And then Summoning Star, during your turn, you can put up to 2 Pokemon that don't have a rule box from your discard pile onto your bench. Like, what are you putting on there? Bibarel? And then you pair that with the new Archeops, which lets you, with the Primal Turbo ability, accelerate 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon. Like, okay, great. You can get Lugia up to... You can charge this in 1 turn. But what we didn't realize was all of the other stuff that Lugia and Archeops can facilitate. I mean, first of all, charging this up with powerful colorless energy makes Lugia do 300 damage before a choice belt, which could go up to 330 damage. And yes, Summoning Star unlocks the Archeops, which is supposed to be a stage 2 fossil Pokemon, which are almost impossible to get into play the old-fashioned way. But you cheat it with Lugia, get the Archeops in the discard pile, use Summoning Star, and all of a sudden you have the most insane energy acceleration in the format, and it facilitates decks like this. This is Andrew Hedrick's list from Knoxville Regionals. He just won back-to-back regional championships with the Lugia Archeops deck, and yes, Lugia is a problem in and of itself, but the Archeops also facilitates other attackers like Radiant Charizard for 1 energy, can hit for 250 damage at the end of the game. Amazing Rare Eviltal, which is tucked in the corner here. It has an attack that costs 5 energy, and you can charge that in 1 turn with Archeops and 1-hit KO anything in the game. There's Raichu in here, Amazing Rare Raichu, which lets you do 120 to the active and 120 to the bench. And like, there were just all of these different single prize attackers that, and other multi-prize attackers like Flying Pikachu has started to see some play in this deck. Duraludon has started to see some play in this deck. And because of it, Lugia VSTAR could pretty much tech for anything while also having insane just raw damage on its own. Heck, even the Stoutland, which is tucked away in the back. I should have picked a different picture. You pair that with the powerful colorless energy and use its double dip fangs move, and you could take 2 prizes on single prize Pokemon. It pretty much had everything it needed to win in any potential matchup. It does, like, because as these Lugia decks did spread out and they added more tech attackers and you thin the Lugia line. Andrew here has 3-3 Lugia. I've seen it go down as low as 3-2. It does get a little less consistent, but its damage, its spike potential is absolutely nuts, and this deck has absolutely dominated throughout the Silver Tempest era of the game, as well as the Crown Zenith era of the game as well. And for anyone that was hoping for some reprieve with a whole bunch of these cards rotating post-rotation, we're losing Quick Ball, Aurora Energy, Powerful Energy, Speed, Lightning, Heat Energy, a lot of these single prize attackers, the Raikou and the Eviltal are going away. The new Lugia is already running amok in Japan and doing some pretty insane stuff, this time with a single strike package with the Tyranitar and the Stonjourner, and a Radiant Serena for good measure, which we'll talk about a little later. And this might not be the powerhouse that the current version is, but in a post-rotation world, this appears to be a top 5 deck archetype as well. So for those that were sleeping on Lugia VSTAR at the beginning, myself included, I'm going to have to eat crow for that. Reggie Drago VSTAR initially was considered to be the big deck of this format. Yes, it's got the move Apex Dragon for 2 grass and a fire energy, which lets you copy a dragon Pokemon's moves from the discard pile. You could copy Duraludon's 220 Shred, Lost Impact off Giratina, do 280 damage and throw 2 energy into the Lost Zone. Gudra's what's the Gudra move? Rolling Iron, do 200 damage, take 80 less damage the following turn. There's even a Dragonite that I have here where you could do 180 damage and then accelerate 3 basic energy to your other Pokemon in any way you like, which is really awesome. And it seems like it would have been great. However, it never really found its footing. It felt like there was just a few too many steps to make this work. Trying to cover the grass and the fire energy, plus getting the Pokemon in the discard pile, plus getting Reggie Drago set up. I think there was just a few too many pieces for consistency's sake that just made it more difficult to play than something like a Lugia. That being said, this is my favorite deck out of those that came out of Silver Tempest. It's my pet deck. I actually have don't mind the prices here. I've got 3 copies of Reggie Drago V, and I am hoping to build Reggie Drago VSTAR in full at some point, even if it's not necessarily the strongest tournament deck. I have no idea how Reggie Drago is going to perform post-rotation, but it's a deck that I absolutely love to play, and one that we've covered a bunch on the channel. I have like 3 different Reggie Drago videos, one with the Leafeon, one with the Arceus, and one with Rillaboom and Leafeon. All 3 are a ton of fun to play. I personally love the Leafeon and the Rillaboom version, but Rillaboom is rotating out, so we'll have to find another way to play this card post-rotation, but I think Reggie Drago will be okay. If anything, it is bound to get better post-rotation as the game introduces more dragon Pokemon. Here's to hoping. Alolan Vulpix VSTAR has a really cool move. Snow Mirage for 160 damage. It is 160 Shred, and on top of that, you get to prevent your opponent's damage when they are attacking with a Pokemon that has an ability. Unfortunately, this card didn't get too much traction. Like, yeah, you could probably use it as a tech include in an Arceus deck or a Lugia deck even, but a Vulpix on its own was a little awkward to accelerate with the 3 energy, and then there were just the ways around it. Like, you could path to the peak yourself and then turn off your own abilities and attack, and then certain big attackers like Mew V Max just don't have abilities, and Vulpix would just get stomped out in that regard. That being said, it does have Silvery Snowstar, which is not a bad V-Star power, where it does 70 damage to each of your opponents, or for each of your opponent's Pokemon V in play, pretty much enough to one-shot a Mew V Max. At the time of this recording, I haven't made a video covering this card, but maybe we'll do this one soon. And if actually by the time you see this, maybe I already have. Yeah, just search for that. Reggie Lucky V is a card along with Reggie Lucky V Max that's actually probably going to see more play going forward in a post-rotation world. It's not so bad with the V, where it's got Lightning Wall, does 100 damage, and Reggie Lucky takes 100 less damage, which makes it a really interesting attacker against single prize decks like Lost Box, where you can take out single prize Pokemon while also nullifying almost all of their damage. And then Reggie Lucky V Max has the Transistor ability, where your basic lightning Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So you would set up a couple of these on the bench and then play something like Raichu V, or the big one was Vikavolt. And Vikavolt with Reggie Lucky actually won a couple of major tournaments here and there in the Silver Tempest and Crown Zenith era. Going forward, I think Reggie Lucky V and V Max are going to see more play as part of the upcoming Miraidon deck. Hisuian Arcanine V was a fun card for YouTube creators for a couple of days. It's got the Rock Bullet attack that does 90 damage and does 30 more damage for each fighting energy attached to this Pokemon. You combo this with the Galarian Zapdos that accelerates energy to itself, and you combine it with the Irresistible Force ability, where when you move Arcanine into the active, you can grab energy from the bench to the active and set yourself up in a way where you can get massive one-hit KOs on anything in the game. Heck, you actually wanted to go second with this deck and then hopefully get the turn 1 donk. but it wasn't ultimately consistent enough to make it a viable threat in competitive play. Serperior VSTAR is not my favorite. One grass, 2 colorless. You could use double turbo here as well. Does 190 damage, and you may move any amount of energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon in any way you like. And one of the big combos you could do was make this as tanky as you can. You throw a big charm on it, get the Kricketune that increases your HP by 20, put a Radiant Gardevoir down, make sure that Serperior can't get one-shotted, and then you move the double turbo energy to this Altaria, and then on the following turn you use Magical Echo to move all of the damage counters off of Serperior and onto the active Pokemon. I did make a profile video for this. I will say, like, it wasn't the most fun to play and it does feel a bit underpowered. That being said, I did see at least one Japanese tournament where this card was one of the top decks in a tournament. Maybe there is some secret sauce to this that we haven't discovered. Maybe it takes a step up in a post-rotation world. We're just gonna have to see. We got 3 more Radiant Pokemon from this set, including Radiant Serena, which has the Elegant Heal ability. Once during your turn, you may heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. This was most notable in there was a Mewtwo V Union deck with a Gardevoir with a Gengar that moved damage around, and it was possible to like spread the damage in a way where you spread it across all your Pokemon. You use Serena to then clear all that damage and then move the damage around again, so you're pretty much healing Mewtwo V Union for free, which was absolutely nuts. At this point in time, everyone is kind of using Radiant Gardevoir instead, but going forward, as V Pokemon start to decline in use, Radiant Serena is probably going to be that go-to instead. And then even in post-rotation Japan, this Radiant Serena is seeing play in the Lugia deck as well. So Radiant Serena's time might actually be coming soon. Radiant Alakazam is a interesting one. It's got the ability Painful Spoons. Once during your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of their Pokemon. This saw like the tiniest bit of play in the Silver Tempest era. After Lugia just dominated the field, a whole host of counter decks that were using Paralysis became popular with the Articuno that we'll talk about in a sec, and Radiant Alakazam was in a couple of them to move damage counters around in a way that helped to facilitate their game plan. Going forward, I think this is actually going to be an interesting combo with the new Hawlucha card coming out of Scarlet and Violet. The thing with the Hawlucha card, and I should have had it pulled up on the screen, is that it is like Galarian Zigzagoon, where you put it on the board, but instead of putting 1 damage counter anywhere you want, you get to put 2 damage counters, one damage counter on a Pokemon, and then another damage counter on a different Pokemon. So you can hit 2 Pokemon at once, but you can't hit the active. And a card like Radiant Alakazam could rejigger the damage from Hawlucha and get it on the active. So something like a Samurott VSTAR or the Mad Lad still playing Jolteon V Max can get their proper damage in. Last but not least of the Radiant cards is Radiant Jirachi, and this was a maddening card. It has the ability Entrusted Wishes, where if you knock it out, a player that has Radiant Jirachi gets to take 3 cards of their choice from the deck and put it into their hand, which can absolutely make it worth it. You sacrifice Jirachi and you get the 3 cards you need to absolutely dominate. And on top of that, Astral Misfortune, where you flip 2 coins, and if both of them are heads, you get an instant KO on your opponent's active Pokemon. I have absolutely lost Mew V Max to a Radiant Jirachi and wanted to rip my hair out. Curlia from this set is going to see a lot of play going forward. It basically has the Cinccino ability. This one's called Refinement, where you discard a card and you get to draw 2 cards. This has been an ability we've seen over and over again in the Pokemon trading card game, and this is going to see a lot of play as a draw engine for a number of different decks. And on top of that, with Gardevoir EX coming out really soon, this is going to be a big part of that deck as well. And on top of that, we also have the Gardevoir, which has the same refinement ability. So you can start with the Curlia, discard a card, draw 2 cards, evolve it into Gardevoir, and then discard another card and draw 2 more cards. Pretty nifty. Bryson is an neat attacker with its Flare Parade attack, does 60 damage for each Serena card in your discard pile. This does have the potential to hit really hard. You can accelerate this with Double Turbo Energy, you could accelerate this with Magma Basin. It never really stood on its own as its own deck though, nor did it really gain much traction with the Zoroark box deck. Like, yes, it's going to run this card, but Zoroark box as a whole didn't really find its footing, despite it potentially having the tools to counteract everything in the game. Articuno was a unsung hero in this format, where it was one of the weird hard counters to Lugia VSTAR, where a lot of Lugia decks were not running any sort of switch cards, especially at the beginning, and you could spam Wild Freeze, which does 50 damage, or you do 50 damage to yourself, but you do 70 damage to the Pokemon in the active, and you paralyze it. And because a lot of Lugia decks were not running any sort of switches, the Lugia would get stuck in the active. You could combo this with the Emergency Jelly card, which I probably should have had pulled up here to heal it, and then just spam it over and over again and get a free knockout on a Lugia VSTAR. Raichu is another card that basically saw only a little bit of play in the Zoroark box deck. Its ambushing spark attack is pretty neat. It does 40 damage, and if your opponent has used their VSTAR power during this game, this attack does 100 and more damage. So 280 damage if you're hitting for weakness, which is perfect to knock out Lugia VSTAR and Palkia VSTAR. It's a really nice attack, but you weren't really going to use this as its own standalone deck, and even within the context of the Zoroark box, it just wasn't enough to push that deck into the meta. Moving on to trainer cards, Forest Sealstone is a bonkers card. For any decks that were running V Pokemon that didn't have a VSTAR power, you were going to have 1 or 2 of these in your deck because its VSTAR power is nuts. Star Alchemy lets you grab 1 card from the deck and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. It's basically half of an Arceus VSTAR, and just being able to grab 1 card can make such a difference, especially in a world where Path to the Peak, or what's it called? Especially in a world where you just need that 1 card that can push you over the top. And with Path to the Peak, Path to the Peak doesn't stop this card, so you can still use this ability, grab a Stadium Bump. Like Mew V Max was the biggest one that used Forest Sealstone, and you could use this to get out of traps like Path to the Peak and so on. But for any deck that didn't have a VSTAR power, having this was amazing. Serena is a amazing card where it has 2 different purposes. You can use it as draw power and discard power, where you can discard up to 3 cards and then draw up to 5, or you could switch one of your opponent's Pokemon V into the active with their active Pokemon. And I think early on players were using like almost swapping out Boss completely for Serena, but that didn't quite work out. I mostly run 1 Serena, maybe 2. I still find Boss really important because I oftentimes find myself wanting to gust a non-V Pokemon, which means that, yeah, Serena's great for its utility, but there are going to be times where I want to gust stuff that isn't a Pokemon V, and because of that, you don't want to take Boss's orders out. So you're going to have some sort of split with Boss and Serena in most decks during this era of the game. Of course, as we transition into a more EX heavy meta, Serena's probably going to fade away, but I don't think that transition is going to be quick, as based on what we're seeing out of Japan, it still seems like Pokemon V are dominating the game. Capturing Aroma is not a great Pokemon search card. You flip a coin, and if you flip heads, you can grab an evolution Pokemon. If you flip tails, you get a basic Pokemon. However, we are losing some of the best Pokemon search from the Sword and Shield era that's rotating out, including Quick Ball and Evolution Incense, and that really sucks. I love both of those cards. They're amazing. Capturing Aroma, because of the coin flip part of it, is worse, but because we don't have any other replacements to Quick Ball and Evolution Incense, some decks are probably going to be running a few of these, and admittedly, it kind of makes me sick to my stomach. Earth and Sealstone is a tantalizing card where it has the move Star Gravity, where for 3 colorless energy, you put damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon V until it has 100 HP remaining. On certain decks, you can do incredible damage, and the one off the top of my head that seems to make the most sense here is Urshifu, Rapid Strike Urshifu V Max, but we never really got to see this card in action at all. Leafy Camo Poncho is an interesting tech. You slap this on a V-Star or a V-Max, and all of a sudden, your opponent can't use boss's orders to gust it up. In certain decks where you had Pokemon that were bench sitters, kind of like a Crobat or a Reggie Lucky V Max, something like that, you could put Leafy Camo Poncho on to protect yourself from getting gusted. This set also had 2 special energy, one of them being Regenerative Energy. And this one is a little weird in its use, where you apply this to a Pokemon V, and when you evolve it, you heal 100 damage from that Pokemon. This hasn't really seen a lot of play, but I think it's going to see a bit of play post-rotation. Yeah, we've got a copy of Regenerative Energy in the Lugia VSTAR deck. It still feels like, just theory crafting off the top of my head, the likelihood that you would attach this to a Lugia gets hit, and then you would evolve to Lugia VSTAR and be able to heal 100 damage feels very situational, but Lugia VSTAR also needs just special energy to round out that deck, and there's just not a lot of special energy that's going to be around post-rotation. So yeah, this sneaks in here and there, but I don't see this being a major card going forward. However, Vguard Energy definitely saw more play. This let your Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks from opposing Pokemon V, and 30 less damage is enough to negate, for example, a Choice Belt, or just bring a bunch of attacks down. 30 damage oftentimes is the difference between getting knocked out and being able to survive a turn. So a number of decks did run Vguard Energy. A couple of decks like Lugia, for example. Of course, Lugia runs all the special energy. Some Arceus decks ran Vguard Energy as well. And this was a really nifty card. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. We are almost done our look at the Sword and Shield era of the Pokemon trading card game. It'll be the Crown Zenith set, and then I think we'll do a separate video on the Black Star promo cards. Any of the notable ones that weren't in the main set, we will cover there. And then that's going to be it for probably a couple of years. I don't think it makes sense to do like a look back, a retrospective of the sets as they happen. I mean, maybe we could if we frame it up a little differently, of like, here's the notable cards like within the context of this. But I like the way that we did it here, where we had the passage of time. In particular, certain cards are late bloomers, and if I was just talking about them in the moment of their release, then there aren't nearly as many things to talk about, right? Certain cards like Amazing Rare Yveltal and Amazing Rare Raichu, which all found a new lease on life years after they were released. So I think that's going to be it for... yeah, we'll talk the last of the main sets. We've got 2 more videos to go, Crown Zenith, and then if there are any promo cards, we'll cover those in a separate video, and then we'll put this series to rest for a couple of years. But yeah, if you've watched any of these, if you watched this one or you watched any of the other ones before, thank you so much for watching these. I truly appreciate your support. And some quick plugs before we go. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at @InThirdPerson. You can also find me on Twitch at @InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can find me on the website, my website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I will see you later. Bye-bye.